federal government of Nigeria has commenced moves to avert the planned strike by the Nigerian Association of Resident Doctors by initiating high-level discussions with the doctors. The national body of resident doctors had reasoned from an extraordinary meeting on Saturday to give the federal government 2 weeks to meet its demands or face industrial disharmony. The meeting was summoned to discuss burning issues affecting the welfare of the doctors and the alarming rate of their flight to other countries, as well as that of other healthcare workers on account of poor remuneration, inadequate funding of the health sector, and the attendant negative effect on the citizens. Among other things, they're demanding an immediate increment in the consolidated medical salary structure to the tune of 200% of the current gross salaries of doctors.
Now we now turn to the president of the National Association of Resident Doctors, Dr. Emeka Orji, and Arise analyst Dr. Sam Amadi to speak on the ultimatum by resident doctors and how workers have fared in the last 8 years of the Buhari administration. I want to say good to have you gentlemen here in the studio today.
Thank you.
All right, let's start it off. Looking at how, since we are celebrating May Day today and it's very significant to workers across Nigeria, we know that a lot has been happening. But looking back at this administration as we are coming to the end of a tenure, so to speak, how would you say doctors or the medical practitioners in Nigeria have fared? Are they better off than they were? Or do you think they are worse off than they were before 2015? Talk to us about this.
Well, I think in answering this question, I'm going to use some statistics because we are scientists. And what I'm going to say may not just be about this current government. What we know is that over the years, from 2009 to this current year, there has been this steady decline in the welfare of doctors, their take-home pay, the working condition, and a host of other things. And of course, that is why you are having this current challenge of brain drain threatening the health sector. Because if doctors are being treated well, you want to ask why are we living in our numbers? It's simply because the condition of service is not appropriate. Your work is not being well remunerated. And this is even when you are now having inflation rate increasing, cost of fuel increasing, cost of living, forex exchange. I mean, if you know the figures as at 2009, when the current salary structure we are using was approved, and you compare with the figures for this year, 2023, you will understand that there is nobody that can live on that, and that is at the root of the current crisis we have in the health sector.
Now, Dr. Sam Amadi, the Minister of Labour and Employment, Dr. Chris Ngige, believes that this present administration has done quite a lot for Nigerian workers. And he actually also believes that the doctors' demands are absurd and their sense of entitlement is too much. You know, I'd just like you to react to this comment.
Well, first, it depends on how the minister sees it. Essentially, like the Prince of the Doctors here said, the figures don't tell a good story, not just about doctors, but essentially about almost all the sectors. So 3 things to bear in mind. One is attitude. How does the government see workers, whether they are doctors, lawyers, or rank and file, civil servants, or those electricity workers and aviation workers? I think the paradigm, not just this government, that has been part of since the early 80s and late 70s with Thatcher and, of course, with Reagan, the triumph of neoliberal economics, the notion that workers and unions generally are an impediment to reform, creates the mindset that government looks upon them first as we and them. So that this notion of opposition, that workers and their unions, whether they are doctors or other professionals, are essentially opposed to government. So in that sense, we've not seen good labor relation of the type that the minister would boast about. So that's why that shows in a number of avoidable strikes and all kinds of turmoil in the sector. Again, if you look at remuneration, I mean, government for, generally across the board, minimum wage has not taken off properly, and even minimum wage compared to today. Somebody can argue that if you look at the impact of inflation, forex on livelihood and earning, maybe a real minimum wage should be somewhere after 15,000 per month for civil servants generally. So I think in terms of welfare, the government cannot beat its chest. Now, government can say that it has faced fiscal challenges, but the problem is, look, when you look at how government has also managed the cost of governance, I've argued that the first person to take a haircut should be the executive. And so if you are talking about fiscal challenge, which can happen, but then you are not showing that you yourself, you are taking the haircut as you are prescribing, then that's dangerous. So we see in Asia, we see across the world that when you have serious, severe fiscal challenges, government kind of first start reducing its cost of governance, removing privilege and prerogative. But here, they keep adding, they keep increasing. And then they expect the workers to understand the need to tighten their belt. So the claim that this government has done well with liberation is actually not true, cannot be true. I mean, if you think around ASU, for example, another professional association of teachers, we have been on strike for upward of 7 months, and up to now, issues not resolved. So it's not true. Then the question then is, could it be better? It could have been better. It might be that what the doctors want, for example, may look big in the context of what they're taking now. But if you put it in the context of what has happened to earning real income, and take in the context of maybe comparable countries, then you might see that maybe it's not that outrageous. So I think really government has not done well in terms of managing the labor relations, whether with doctors or with teachers or with general civil servants and other employees in the country.
All right, I would like both Dr. Orji and Dr. Amadi to probably sound off on this. Let's talk about the medical brain drain and the bill that is being proposed right now to stop that exodus, so to speak. Now, a lot of political analysts have said, practice what you preach. That the political class, Dr. Amadi, you alluded to this, seem not to be on the same wavelength as we Nigerians. Because a lot of people are asking that if the current president gets his medical services outside the shores of Nigeria, if the president-elect gets his medical services outside the shores of Nigeria, but they are insisting that we Nigerians and doctors should probably stay and get our medical services here in Nigeria. That it's a case of you're not practicing what you're preaching. Sound off on this for us. Let's get to hear from you.
Okay, the truth is that even the bill as proposed by Honorable Ganley Johnson is an affront on the Nigerian Constitution. You cannot seek to enact a law that will restrict freedom of movement and choice. And again, you want to do it for doctors. Secondly, the issue is he's talking about subsidy in the public schools for medical doctors. One will want to ask, to what extent are they really subsidizing the tuition? Because it is too simplistic to place side by side the tuition we pay with that of private schools without first analyzing what that payment is meant for. Because we know that in public schools, after that payment, you see go ahead to pay a host of other things. You buy your books and provide for your internet and all that. But you don't find that in most of the private schools. Again, because he's not in the sector, he doesn't even understand how and when people live, at what point people live. We are talking about specialist living. The people he wants to put in his net are those that usually, when you graduate, what happens is that people spend that few years to gather the money they need, because it's not even cheap to seek greener pastures. So essentially, that bill is not going to achieve anything. It will end up worsening the situation. We have done a study, and nobody has come out to challenge us on this, that the most important cause of brain drain in the health sector is poor remuneration. Government has not been able to address that, and as long as you don't address it, you will keep having brain drain. No amount of bill outside what I just said will be able to curtail it. You want to deny new graduates of medicine their license. Who told them that people cannot live without that license? But simply because they are not aware and they didn't consult before proposing that bill, they don't know all this. We are appealing to the government because the ultimatum that our members have given, we are on the 3rd day now, and we don't want to go back to those years where you have multiple strikes. We have tried over the past few years to maintain the peace in the health sector. Even the meeting we had on Friday, we had a hard time trying to control people's anger because they feel that government has not been able to address this issue. We wrote to the Federal Ministerial of Health as far back as July last year, complaining about this issue. And up till now, we've not been called to the negotiation table. And what we are having is a bill that is trying to forcefully keep us here without addressing the root cause of the problem. We want to appeal to them, and we also want to appeal to Nigerians to join us in this fight because we are doing this for them. I'm sure they have been witnessing the increase in waiting time in the hospital, the cancellation of surgeries. Of course, that will happen when you have one doctor doing the work of over 30 doctors because almost everybody has left. Are we going to continue to wait until the whole system collapses? So let them address the root cause of brain drain. And talking about medical tourism, we are also proposing that public officials should at least use this public hospital so that they will come face to face with what we've been talking about. Because there seems to be this total lack of awareness of the gravity of the problem. So it is when they patronize this public hospital, they will understand exactly what we are talking about.
Now, Dr. Amadi, I would like to ask you about the timing of this ultimatum given to the federal government. Is this the right time to be giving the government an ultimatum when it's already winding down? And of course, we know that the president is looking forward eagerly to retirement. So should the battle for implementation of agreement be with this outgoing administration or with the incoming government?
Well, I think fairly can say that probably this is not the right time from a government, the incoming government perspective, meaning that, look, we are going to enter government perhaps hobbled with a key sector on strike. So in that sense, this might not be a right timing. But again, unionists are opportunists, quote unquote. They have to strike when they think that they're going to win, be more popular. I mean, if you're a unionist and you strike when you're going to be redundant or when your threat would be disregarded, then you're not a good unionist. So they're opportunistic, not about that. But then the bigger question that was asked earlier, you see, when we study migration, I did a lot of study for Osiwa, and the critical issue is what I call the push and pull factor. Okay, the push factor is what the president is talking about here, which is the condition of work here, the payment, the lack of respect, the lack of quality hospitals and facilities, even for training, retraining. I like to read a little bit about medicine, and if I look at New England Law Journal, Medical Journal of Medicine and others, the thing about medicine is that it's an art to keep learning and improving. So if you don't have the facilities to keep learning, even on the job, you will not have the satisfaction of being a real doctor. The pull factor is what's going on all over the world. You see that in the UK, doctors, they're also suffering some shortage of doctors. Doctors in the UK are not being paid as their contemporaries in the US or elsewhere are being paid, and they are migrating. So the answer to this migration, which is not good for national development, I understand, is to deal with the root problem. That bill is actually almost useless and idiotic in the sense that, look, you are solving a problem that is caused by condition of service, by the economics of a profession, through coercive measure that seem to ban everything. It wouldn't work. the real thing is, yes, we're going through a financial crisis, but at the same time, we are going through an idea crisis. We're not being able to take hold of the structure and redefine focus. You have to invest a lot more money in healthcare, and that means investing in the well-being of doctors so they have motivation in their learning, retraining, in their motivation, and of course in the facilities. So I think that somehow there does need to have a change of development paradigm. So much focus on financial analysis, so much focus on physical infrastructure. And Bill Gates said it right. He said, look, you guys should focus a lot more on social infrastructure. This is a country that has very high level of poverty. And we know that one of the ways to deal with poverty is education and healthcare, human capital development. So I think that the new government should be watching carefully what's going on here. It's unfortunate they're going to come with fuel crisis, subsidy crisis, health sector. ASU is on the wing, angry. It's like a perfect storm. But then the first is take stock, reverse this mode of development that focuses on antagonizing unionists. You have to work with them, come to the table, transparency, and they show it. Now, how do you ask these guys to trust you when, look at our national hospitals, none of these from senator, even House of Reps, local government councillor, chairman, few people, if any, of these guys attend our public health institutions. Look at the symbolism when the vice president went to do some surgery in Lagos, in Nigeria, even though it's a private hospital, but the fact that it was in Nigeria, it showed a sense of leadership. And so you don't have skin in the game. If you're not patronizing our education system, if you're not patronizing our healthcare system, you have no skin in the game. And that's probably why they play deaf ears to some of this clamor for improvement in the welfare of doctors and teachers and lawyers and everybody, and improvement in the facilities in which these people work. So I think that we've come to a human development crisis at this point, where we have to admit that, look, if doctors keep moving at the rate they're moving, we might come to see that there's a collapse of civilization, because if you're not going to have good doctors attend to even ordinary people in the streets, then you're going to have morbidity high, you're going to have low, very high mortality, and then there's just no point talking about improving productivity. It won't work. So I think that we need to grapple with this crisis, restore back confidence of these doctors and other professionals to the government, and then begin to see where do we have to cut down to put in more money. And then at that point, we can talk to doctors to be more patriotic. Of course, you may earn more in Saudi, in UK, US, but if you have confidence in your country and their leaders, you could take a lesser salary and condition of service, but you know that there's dignity, there's respect for the job you are doing. I think that's what's missing. It's not just about the money, it's about the sense of trust. Most people who are living this country today are not just living because they're not earning less. They are not even sure of their future, they're not sure of their life, they're not even sure whether the country and the profession they are serving will give them the stability to achieve their own personal professional goals. Those are critical issues that should be addressed, and not using laws to threaten them with decertification or no certification and all that. I think it's a wrong way, and it kind of symbolizes how this government has approached public policy. They have seen it from the hierarchical perspective, command and control, grievance, we and them, rather than seeing it as a collaborative effort to find solutions. And oftentimes, these solutions may not cost as much as we think they will cost.
All right, let's talk about the Minister of Labour and Employment. Some will say that he has actually made situations worse. Negotiations have dragged. He has made utterances that have been called to question, speaking about the fact that any doctor that wants to go can go, that we have enough doctors in Nigeria. Talk to us about the Minister of Labour and Employment, because all this we've been speaking about is still about labour, employment. How has Dr. Chris Ngige, or Senator Chris Ngige, as the case will be, how has he probably added or probably tried to alleviate the problems that doctors do face in Nigeria?
Well, I think the mistake we make is, and that has been the problem all this while, that any little disagreement in the health sector, we push it over to the Minister of Labour and Employment. But we have Federal Ministry of Health, we have a minister there, And when you have a threat like this, what should happen is that your parent ministry should call you for discussion. It's only when that discussion fails that, of course, maybe when it gets to the level of the actual industrial action, that the Ministry of Labor comes in. So, but the mistake has always been that when you have this threat, instead of the people in the Ministry of Health rising up to the occasion and addressing this issue squarely, they will simply sit by and allow the Ministry of Labor to do everything. And I just hope that will not happen in this case, because the issues are clear. The letter we wrote last year was to the Honorable Minister of Health. And up to today, that letter has not been responded to. We know that there is this speculation, or whether real or whether it is factual, that they have been discussing with NMA on this issue. But we also have it somehow on good authority that no discussion on this review of comments has happened this year. And we are also hearing the figures that are being offered. And like Dr. Amadi said, this is not just about throwing any figure or not. We want to know how they arrived at those figures. You cannot just throw anything to us. We have to be scientific. We know that the exchange rate in 2009 was around 152 naira to dollar. What is it today? Close to 800. The fuel price then was 65 naira. What is it today? And there's even an imminent further increase. So any figure that you are going to, unless you don't want to address the root cause of this brain drain, any percentage increment that you are bringing on board should carry all these figures, should take into consideration all these figures we are talking about. And there are other issues that are consequent upon this poor remuneration, because people are living in droves. You have less number of doctors, they are overworked, and then when they fail to meet up with seeing patients and all that, they attack them. That's why you have violence in the health sector. We're also talking about dilapidation of infrastructure. When was the last time there is any deliberate move to extensively equip the hospitals to meet up with the standard that is expected? There's no doctor that will have a patient before him. You know what to do to treat the patient, but you don't have the facility to do that. There's no doctor that will be happy about it. And the thing is leading to depression. We're also talking about insecurity. And many of these things will not even take money. Why don't we have housing scheme, car loans? These are things that when you do, even the people that have keyed into it, we think less about leaving the country, because they have a debt to pay over some years, and they cannot live without paying those debts. So we are talking about government taking deliberate steps to address this issue, and in discussion with us, and not to go on their own to try to bring up a bill. Why our members are demanding for the immediate withdrawal of that bill? We know it's a private member bill, but we also have information that some interest in the Ministry of Health are supporting the honorable member, because they have tried to do that in the ministry, but we stopped them. They are now trying to now use the honorable Ganiyu Johnson to bring up this bill that is against the constitution. So we are demanding for immediate withdrawal. There is no need coming for public hearing. The honorable member is a Nigerian. He is seeing in fact, global condemnation. Everybody is condemning the bill except those in government. So there is no need doubling down on that bill, bringing people to Abuja for public hearing, wasting taxpayers' money on that. That bill can be withdrawn. Let them come for discussion. We will tell them, we will work with them to resolve all these issues.
Now, Dr. Amadi, we've seen this scenario over and over again. I mean, resident doctors will give the federal government an ultimatum. In some cases, most likely, the federal government will not meet up with the ultimatum. The doctors go on strike. The average Nigerian patient bears the burden. Some lose their lives in the process. But I'm wondering, are there measures, maybe some law or policy that can be put in place to protect the average Nigerian who usually suffers, who usually bears the brunt of all these strikes when they eventually happen?
Well, I think from a legal perspective, I mean, class actions, very, very aggressive litigation against government and against institutions, even the health institutions, is one of the options that could happen abroad. I mean, many Nigerians think that at the end of the day, they say, two elephants fight, the grass suffer. And that's a typical case here in the health sector. Whenever they give this ultimatum and the government, as usual, like I said, don't pay attention seriously to find a way to avert it, it crystallizes. And many of these, those who are going to be mostly affected are, primary and secondary health care, and then maybe government institutions, hospitals, where ordinary Nigerians, quote unquote, more often purchase health care. Some of the big people in government, even if they don't go abroad, will have the direct lines to consultants and to specialists and to private hospitals where they could be taken care of in what is now appearing as a dual sector, a dual arrangement, where it's the official public health care and as the unofficial private health care. So even the doctors who are striking themselves would also engage themselves in private practice to live, to have access to income. And so the person who loses in all this, the same workers that government does not want to increase the salary, the same workers who struggle to buy fuel. So what I think will happen is, look, there was a time we say essential workers don't go on strike, including doctors, majorly. And then we've realized that striking also is a fundamental right in the sense that doctors and every other person should withdraw or threaten to withdraw their services when the render of those services are no longer possible under very, dehumanizing or debilitating situation. The debate here is whether level of responsibility. I think from the Hippocratic Oath, doctors owe a responsibility to their clients, their patients, to manage them, to ensure they say, but also owe responsibility to themselves to be alive, to survive. Again, government has responsibility to both patients and doctors to provide, the Constitution says the purpose of government is the security and well-being of Nigerian citizens. I think what's happening here is the failure of, and it may be constitutional, people argue around why don't we constitutionalize chapter 2 of the Constitution that talks about socioeconomic rights, so that healthcare, not just in terms of what is in the National Health Insurance Scheme or other health status, but access to health in the sense in which it is known in international law and in some municipal law would be enforceable in Nigeria. So patients could actually sue government for egregious direction of duty in allowing, for example, the time that resident doctors were on strike for upward of maybe 2 months, 2-3 weeks and all that, and you can actually put a figure to the losses, both in terms of human life, in terms of morbidity, in terms of spread of disease, in terms of loss of productivity of those who are sick and could be attended on time. If you put this together, there could be an class action filed in court against the government primarily, and maybe vicariously against health providers themselves. So we really need to avert this by having a sense in which government will genuinely sit with these doctors. I would urge that as much as possible, doctors will take strike as a last resort, because the service that doctors render is a public good. Even though we say that a private good, it has to be paid, it can exclude people. If they don't pay you, you don't treat them. But it's inherently a public good. And what that means is that beyond the contractual relationship with government or with private employers, doctors seem to have a public duty to protect the health of community. And so they would also not be too prone to go on strike, considering how valuable their service is to humanity. But at the same time, we who are citizens should also add our voice to government. What I don't like is the fact that when there's a labor dispute, whether it's doctors or teachers or other health workers are complaining about very bad services, the citizens don't take interest in these issues, because ultimately they lose. These doctors probably are not treating themselves. These doctors are going to treat people. Imagine what happens when they're on strike with case of emergency. We've had real recorded deaths that shouldn't have occurred, but because even as much as we have less ratio of doctor to patient is very, very bad in Nigeria, but with strike, then it becomes zero. So the key thing is that we as citizens have to be interested in trying to push that there will be little or no strike in the health sector. As a matter of fact, there should be no time that doctors as a whole will say, look, you know what, we're withdrawing our services, we're shutting down because we have a trade dispute with government. That shouldn't even happen. There must be effort to solve these problems before they crystallize to the point where doctors go against their natural instinct, which is to keep on attending to patients and now say, you know what, we don't give a damn. We're going to stay at home. We will not be able to take care of our patients because we are not being paid, or we're not being paid well, or we're not being treated well. So I think that's really the crisis we're in now. Legally speaking, there could be a lot of actions which patients and citizens can take against government and against their health provider, depending on the nature of the contractual relationship they have with them. But for a public perspective, what needs to happen now is to avert this strike, ensure that both parties show some sense of goodwill, but I think the burden is more on government to begin to show itself as somebody that doctors can trust. As far as I'm concerned, it's about finance, but it's less than that.
Amadi,
it's actually about
permit me to just quickly,
trust in this government.
Permit me to just quickly throw this one into Dr. Orji as we actually wrap up this particular discussion. Dr. Orji, what will be the middle ground? What will actually serve as a middle ground? Because you and I know that we might not be able to, all the demands might not be able to be met in that particular time frame. For the strike not to hold, or for the strike to be averted, what will be maybe a middle ground or a soft landing of some sorts?
Well, an ultimatum has been issued. Our demands have been communicated to the government. Is when we start discussing that we can find a middle ground. Ultimately, whatever they offer us, we will still stepping down to our National Executive Council for their consideration and for that directive. But we believe that many of the issues we raise are things that can be resolved within the next few days. They are not difficult. All we need is for government to show enough commitment and then resolve few of them. And then maybe we have timelines as to when they will resolve the other issues. But when we keep seeing threats, government should know that we considered all these things before our members gave us this directive. We have not gone on strike for some time now, not because we are afraid of threats, but because we are considering Nigerian citizens. But ultimately, as it is now, we even consider this a fight for the citizens of this country. Because if we don't intervene at this point, we fear that in the next few weeks, there's going to be a total collapse of the health sector, and people will eventually blame us for not speaking up, for not acting when we are supposed to act. So let government initiate discussion. We will find a middle ground during the discussions at the negotiation table.
Now, Dr. Amadi, you talked about strikes looming in almost every sector earlier on. We know that ASU already is complaining that lecturers were excluded from the pay rise recently announced for civil servants. Now, of course, health workers or the resident doctors are also threatening to go on strike. So what danger does this portend for the next administration that will be taking over on May 29th?
I think it means that the government takes over with a lot of sticky points to deal with. And the best way to enter government is first to have a honeymoon, maybe like 2 months, 3 months, where you are basically reviewing notes and articulating first steps, not where you rush into negotiation halls or meetings, try to shut down, put off fire. That's not the best way to enter. So first, so it's going to be a distraction. It's going to complicate entry for the new government. The new government best is to enter where the old government has mopped up all the issues and give you kind of a clean slate, and so you start writing. But here, the old government, as it were, is going to leave so many mess on the table. In fact, today, this is Labor Day. If not for the intervention of the Minister of Labor and Productivity, maybe NLC, TUAC should be on the street today doing labor rally on the streets with the idea that the government itself could afford to refuse labor the use of ego square, which they have been using conventionally. So those kind of error of judgment, those kind of policy missteps puts a burden on the incoming government. And again, it means that the incoming government has to do a lot more to first win confidence and deflect and return everybody to status quo. So, you know what, guys, all the threats, all the strike warnings, all the notice of strike should be nullified. Let's first engage. Now, if they're able to get the unionists to all agree to say, okay, let's give you 2 months, 3 months to sit down and look at things before we continue, then that would be a win for them. So they're entering government with, instead of first sitting down to create coherence in their first steps, they are hopping up and down, talking to resident doctors, talking to ASU, talking to NLC, talking to petroleum sector on subsidy issues, basically coming day one, tiptoeing to avoid getting, pricked by big, broken bottle everywhere, instead of, working in a sure manner. So I think it's a challenge for this government, the incoming government. Again, is that, look, the fiscal situation of the country is bad. And if you're going to think in terms of what should be their priority right now, you now face a crisis of preference. There are too many things on the table. You don't have breathing space to properly prioritize interventions that will knock on effect that can maybe help deflect other crisis. So that's what I see. It calls for more coherence, it calls for forthrightness, and it calls for them to be more maybe energetic in engagement. So day one, this government will then have to step up and start meeting everybody and show some level of trustworthiness so that people, like the doctors, can simply say, okay, we hear you, we think we can do business with you, we shelve this for the next 6 months or the next 4 months, but we want to see X, Y, Z. So that's the only way they can win back an enabling environment to now have the chance to create their own narrative and the pattern of governance they want to see. It's not the right place, the right mode you want to enter government. You want to enter government where you have a honeymoon to really sit down and then mess up by yourself or get this right by yourself.
I want to say many thanks to you, Dr. Sam Amadi, and also to Dr. Emeka Orji for your time today. Happy Workers' Day.